Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's REDAA webinar, exploring the power and politics of locally led nature restoration. My name is Janine Duffy, and I am part of the REDAA team here at IIED.
And my name's Francesca Booker, and I'm also part of the REDAA team here at IIED. Welcome.
We're also joined by our colleague Roxana from IIED. Roxana is going to give us a quick overview of some housekeeping for the webinar before we begin. So I'll hand over to Roxana.
Thank you so much, Janine. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxana. I'm a digital content officer here at IIED. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. If you want to say anything to the panelists or to ourselves, please use the chat function and make sure that you choose all panelists in the little drop down from Zoom, so we make sure we get the message. And then please use this function as well to report any technical issues that might happen throughout the webinar, and hopefully we can deal with them. We will have a Q&A part of this webinar, so please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. There's a little screenshot where you can find it on the screen. It's just on your bar on Zoom. And then please use that function throughout the webinar. If you think about any questions, to put them in there. Please don't put them in the chat. Yeah, and then please use the chat right now to introduce yourself a little bit, your name, your organization, and your location, so we know who you all are. Thank you. I'll hand that back now to Janine.
Thank you so much. Great, so I'll just begin with a very quick overview of the agenda. So we're going to begin with an introduction to what the REDAA program is, and then we will hear from our speakers today. So we were joined by 3 REDAA partners, and we'll hear some opening comments from our conversation lead. We'll then have our first presentation that will explore external factors relating to policy and power that affect locally led nature restoration. We'll have a short interactive exercise with the audience, and then we'll move on to our second presentation, which will focus on policy engagement to influence locally led nature restoration, and then we'll have a Q&A session with you all where you can put your questions to our speakers today. Next slide, please. So for those of you who might not have come across us before, the Reversing Environmental Degradation in Africa and Asia programme, or REDAA for short, is an FCDO UK International Development Programme delivered in partnership with the International Institute for Environment and Development. Next slide, please. So REDAA supports locally led research and action for nature restoration and climate resilience across 3 geographical regions: Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. And the programme offers grants and facilitates technical support and mutual learning through a community of practice. Next slide, please.
So briefly, REDAA has 3 main activities that are our focus. The first is improving evidence on key ecosystems, such as their status related to degradation and restoration, their contributions to people's livelihoods. Ultimately, what we want to see is actionable information that can improve restoration and management. The second is around applying and learning from new tools and technical approaches for environmental management, conservation, and restoration. And the third is around strengthening governance, including, for example, finance and support mechanisms, as well as supporting gender equality and socially inclusive long-term decisions and actions. All that REDAA does, all the efforts that we support, intend to support action that is nature positive, strengthens local livelihoods, but also tackles the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. REDAA is currently supporting 10 projects in Sub-Saharan Africa, 4 in South Asia, and 7 in Southeast Asia. And today we're joined by colleagues from Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Ethiopia. Next slide, please. Our webinar today is hosted by members of the locally led nature restoration community. It's a community of practice for anyone with an interest in locally led nature restoration. So no matter where you are, where you're located in the world, no matter where you sit, we welcome you to join our locally led nature restoration community. The intention of our community is to enable exchange and peer learning to build and strengthen these networks that we are all in together, to support capacity building and policy influencing opportunities, and to spread the use of effective evidence and tools. I'm going to be doing this through various means, including online events like this one today, and collaborative knowledge and learning products. So as I say, anyone can join this community, and we welcome you all today. We'll drop a link in the chat where you can sign up. But otherwise, that's everything from Janine and I for now, and I am very happy to be handing over to our conversation lead today. Ritha, over to you.
Thank you very much. It is genuinely a pleasure to be joining all of you today who really want to see change in our global community as far as environment and improved livelihood is concerned. When I heard that I was asked to lead this session, it was genuinely an honor because this is a very important topic. Now, I would like to grasp this opportunity to thank all of you very much for joining us today. My name is Ritha Tarimo, and I work for Trias as the Regional Director for Trias East Africa, and I reside in Tanzania. Trias strengthens organizations of farmers and pastoralists, as well as entrepreneur organizations in 17 countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Europe, with business advice, training, and financial support. I must mention that I also have a special connection with this community because with the support of REDAA, of course, and IID, and the collaboration of our partners and community-led organizations, Trias is also implementing a program by REDAA, which is clear, community-led environmental and agriculture restoration here in Tanzania. And the idea and the focus is to strengthen locally led restoration capacity among farmers and pastoralist communities in southern highlands and the northern part, semi-arid areas of Tanzania. But what is most important today is to delve into our conversation. Now, I must mention, I really thought about this since I was informed of leading. And it dawned on me that our conversation is rather important in supporting, scaling, and sustaining locally led actions for nature restoration. Again, I am honored to lead this timely webinar hosted by REDAA. And I must remind you, how can power and politics support scale and sustain locally led actions for nature restoration? Today's discussion explores a critical and often overlooked dimension of restoration work, governance. Why does governance matter? Because the success of restoration is not only about ecological practices, which is, of course, very important, we all know, but it is also about who holds the power, who makes decisions, and whose voice is heard. So it's about policies and dynamics. As well as, of course, I would like to hear our speakers understanding and influencing these power structures is very essential for ensuring that restoration efforts are equitable, resilient, and sustainable, and truly community-driven. So let's dive into this important conversation. I would like to warmly welcome my colleague in this community of practitioners, Awdenegest Moges, who is an associate professor at Hawassa University, based in Ethiopia. Warmly welcome to share with us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much. My presentation is on tackling challenge of locally led land restoration. It is an experience from a SMILE project, a project which is funded by the REDAA. The SMILE project is focusing on the problem that is a major one in the Central Rift Valley of Ethiopia. Considerable effort have been made to reverse the situation of land degradation. However, The result is not as satisfactory as expected. This is mainly accounted for the weak involvement and participation of local communities, thereby affecting sustainability of the efforts. The study area is Halaba district, which is in the Rift Valley, which suffers from severe land degradation that affect both the environment and livelihood of the local people. The project aims on three important areas where we are trying to develop a comprehensive understanding of land degradation by gathering evidence and actionable information. The second one is we are going to strengthen institutions that are working in land resilience or restoration efforts. The third one is interventions that the project is going to have within the project area. Eventually, we are hoping to have impacts on the improved socio-economic opportunities of the people, as well as improving the community empowerments. Here, I'm going to focus on the major and key activities related to policy and governance issues. One is the key activity SMILE engaged in is the restoration of degraded lands, specifically gully erosion and restoration of common lands. The second one, which actually this project is very much involved, is in strengthening nurseries, farmer training centers, and school environments, which are the major institutions that are actually engaged in land restoration issues. The third important key activity of the project is capacity building, such like training and others. The fourth one is a job creation, and the job creation in order to actually link rural jobs with that of the natural resource management issues, supporting youth and women in the area. Looking at the external factors which are mainly affecting the setup in our own context includes one, the ownership of the project. Ownership of the project is normally an institution are taking the project as a separate entity operating for its own. This weakens effective and coordinated works between the project and a major organization the project focuses. There is no standard procedure established for the integration of the project and the organization, nor there is enforcing law. With respect to this, SMILE actually tries to respond through development of memorandum of understanding that can minimize the effect and challenge SMILE is facing during the implementation of its different activities. The other one is regular consultative meetings being arranged in order to enable the different stakeholders actively being involved. Another important challenge that we are faced is limited institution coordination. The SMILE works with multiple institutions and observed there is limited coordination, which the major reasons we have tried to identify are competing objectives, mandate competition, and lack of communication. Yeah, with respect to these, SMILE is trying to respond stakeholder analysis for improved participation and engagement. We do stakeholder analysis to understand the interest, the influence, power, resources, and coordination of the stakeholders. Recommended better engagement strategies within the system. The other challenge is a centralized decision-making structure where most of the major restoration efforts are top-down with little room for the community decisions. There are government-driven mass mobilization with a strict timing and planning. So these sort of situations are actually hindering us in order to involve the local people and communities to get involved in sustaining the works that has been done in the area. SMILE is trying to respond to this situation through promoting participatory and inclusive approaches. These involves also providing multiple trainings of different kinds that capacitate the concerned. In regard to these, nursery restoration methods and as well as other trainings have been provided. The other challenge is land ownership, which is a critical issue in regard to the Ethiopian situation. Land is owned by the government and farmers have user rights. Over 50 years of restoration efforts, yet still considered as mainly government responsibility. Self-initiative is to the minimum. Moreover, as population is increasing, the land size is becoming smaller and smaller through the fragmentation issues. And thus, this hinders some of our activities, whereby we try to respond through awareness creation in outreach programs. These outreach programs will create awareness and extending local experiences to the community. These are supported by also disseminating success stories that we have obtained from the farmer themselves, which could be local experiences leading to the extending it or outscaling it to others. The other challenge is a land management law, where this is absent in our situation, where there is no law for the protection of degraded land, own land, as well as common land, failure to protect own land or damage caused to other lands. Moreover, the judiciary system does not entertain any complaint, unwillingness to participate or act, as well as damage that have been caused due to this degradation. Along this, SMILE tried to respond in capacity building, material support in trainings, as well as we are trying to encourage farmers through rewards and development of bylaws. The power structure in the community also is another challenge, where restoration effort in most cases are decided top-down from the government or other intervening organizations. In the effort to create job, beneficiary selection threatened by favoritism, resulting in inequity. SMILE response by trying to be inclusive in all of the activities. One good example is gully erosion and gully control activities that we have been doing by collectively trying to encourage people to work together. So SMILE in trying to avoid or reduce the inequity problem that is created, transparency in decision-making have been put in place, where community representatives are involved in selection and evaluation of beneficiaries. Other challenge is the upstream-downstream conflict, where the landscape situation actually exposes our project area to such problems. Gully damage generated from upstream runoff is a critical problem, which creates the upland and lowland areas. This is the gully system, which spans from the upper landscape down to the lower agricultural land, which is caused damaging, intersecting the land and sedimentation problem. There is no judiciary system to enforce this. say by compensating the lower land areas which are actually suffering from such damage. So such problem worsen under conditions where the area or the landscape is, or the watershed is under different administrative regions. SMILE has tried to respond to such situation by using local agreements or bylaw. We are trying to encourage people to have a very good local dialogue and come up to agreements to do things better, as well as we also encourage bylaws to be developed. Apart from this, SMILE has tried to come up from evidences, some lobbying exercise in order the situation be formally under developed laws. It's not only challenge that we have faced, but there are also opportunities that we do have in order our activities to be enhanced or better put into practice. These opportunities facilitate the SMILE activities, existing initiative as well as policies are supporting us. The existing initiative includes mass mobilization campaign, the Green Legacy Tree Planting Initiative, the Productive Safety Net program, and the CALM, which is a climate action through landscape management program, actually are really some of the locally data restoration issues, opportunities as an existing system. There are also existing policies which are actually being used as opportunities to enhance restoration. This includes the climate resilient green economy, the Ethiopian National Dryland Restoration Strategy, development, management, and utilization of community watershed proclamation, which are actually put into practice 5 years ago, which these all are opportunities to be exploited to enhance the activities of the SMILE project to achieve its intended goals. This is all what I have as a presentation. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Audi. Very interesting how you've really managed to keep time. And thank you so much for providing us with an overview of the work that you do in Ethiopia. Very interesting to see the complementarities in the work that we do together to ensure that all places that we work, it is communities that are at the forefront. But today is really mainly about our audience, and I would really like to welcome chats. Please drop a chat and let us know your questions. What are the key external factors related to policy and power challenging locally led nature restoration in your context? Because I know we are all from different organizations that are supporting community-led, and if not, how is this a challenge for you, and how are you tackling? So if you can drop a few questions, we'll give you a bit of time to do that. I would like to give you an example to support brainstorming and really sparkle creativity. For example, in Ethiopia, overlapping responsibilities across multiple government institutions such as agriculture, education, and job creation. However, there's a lack of coordination or collaboration between these institutions. And we know it happens even outside Ethiopia. So fragmented leads to inefficiencies, resource wastage, policy misalignment, and bureaucratic delays. And how is your experience where you are? Kindly share. Thank you. Thank you so much. We really have to move forward. As you all know, this is I see participants from everywhere really engaging in this important conversation. Very interesting. Thank you all so much for your points that keep coming in. But I know it's very interesting to continue commenting. You can, but we also welcome another colleague to share. So we have two speakers today, as you all know. Ode has presented, and now we have Lassana. Lassana is a legal professional focusing on human rights and now land rights, ensuring that things are moving, really putting the community at the forefront. So I welcome you, Lassana. You have 15 minutes. Welcome to also share.
Thank you, Ritha, and thank Lassana for helping me with sharing my slides. Yeah, so I work for Forest People Program, and FPP work directly with indigenous communities, supporting them to secure the land right, territories and resources, and also protect the forest and help them to decide their own future. In the Congo Basin, we work mainly in Cameroon, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also the Republic of Congo. And the aim of my presentation today is to help the audience understand how we are trying to manage trade-off between development, human rights, and conservation in DRC and the Republic of Congo. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here I would like to highlight the main feature of land tenure in the Congo Basin, and in particular DRC and the Republic of Congo. So the legal and property rights system retains significant legacy from the colonial periods. And there are two legal systems that overlap, customary and statutory law. And when there is conflict between both, the statutory law takes precedence. And state ownership is the main legal framework for mining, logging, and conservation of biodiversity. There is no equal recognition or protection of customary tenure, despite constitutional recognition of the custom as a source of law. And provision on consultation and ethics under the national law are not based on internationally recognized standards in terms of scope and process. So FPIC is not adequately implemented in practice. And indigenous people have also played an important role in conserving the natural resources and biodiversity, but this role is not recognized by the legislation, so it is overlooked in practice by legislation. Next slide, please. So to summarize the FPP project under the REDAA programs, we want to strengthen the legal framework in both DRC and ROC, and to support indigenous people so that they are able to protect and manage their forest lands. And the impact we want to achieve is to secure sustainable community governance of land and resources. And the activities to achieve this impact are national legal assessment of and gap analysis of existing legislations, and also action research with community, including differential mapping between community who are sharing land that overlaps, and also documenting sustainable tradition and use by community in terms of governance structures, support direct participation of indigenous people in law reform, And we also build some strategic partnership with relevant ministers like in Congo, the Ministry of Justice, Human Rights, and Promotion of Indigenous Peoples. So the outcome, we are expected to better understand the role of indigenous people and also better protect their rights in national law and policy and improve community governance. Next slide, please. So in terms of influencing policy and power, how do we achieve this? How are we trying to influence policy and power? First, you must first understand the obstacles and opportunities to influence power and policy. And my experience in Congo Basin is that this is the first step, because when you take the case of DRC and Congo or any other country in Congo Basin, you will find some loophole and gaps in existing legislation, but also some opportunities. And in relation to opportunities, what we have identified for and trying to engage in the REDAA program is that in both countries, both countries have adopted specific law to protect and promote the right of indigenous people. So you have a 2022 IP law in DRC and the 2011 IP law in Congo. Congo was the first country in Congo Basin to adopt a specific law to protect the right of indigenous people. You also have element of forest codes in both countries, including provision of community forest. Community forest as an alternative to secure customary livelihood and land for indigenous and local communities. And there are also FPIC requirements in terms of land classification, forest classification process in the forest code in both countries. And the indigenous people law provides specific rights for the communities, including the right for indigenous people to participate in decision making that affect their life and livelihoods, and also the right to the land and natural resources. And in case of relocations, if a community agreed to be relocated, then they must be given adequate and fair compensations. And the law also provides for a starting point for indigenous people to challenge government decisions in relation to land allocation in mining or logging or conservation. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we are targeting specific legislation, including the forest law, the land law, and we are also using the opportunity of the indigenous people law to work on the subsequent regulations. So the indigenous law need to be supplemented by additional regulations, and these are some of the opportunity we want to use to integrate standard in relation, international recognized standard, and also the human rights issue acknowledged by the state parties when they ratified relevant human rights instruments. And we are also, in terms of the conservation of biodiversity, we are also targeting the global biodiversity framework, and specifically the goal 3 on conservation, so that the state parties can recognize indigenous territories as an additional opportunity for community to make their own conservation and integrate provision on ICCAs and also other effective conservation measures, OECM, and also the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans Currently, DRC and Congo are in the phase of elaborating the NBSAP, National Biodiversity and Action Plan, and this is also an opportunity to try to integrate human rights consideration and the indigenous people right in this aspect. And in terms of human and wildlife conflict, in the context of conservation, when communities' livelihood, lives, or physical integrity conflict with wildlife, so we speak about issue of human and wildlife conflict. And in Congo Basin and in ROC in particular, this is a long-standing issue, and solutions are really lacking in terms of compensations for crops destroyed by wildlife, for example, and communities have emphasized the need for states to provide adequate compensation for their livelihoods. And next slide, please. And also, I mentioned all of the legislation we are trying to influence, and how are we doing that? So we are specifically doing some national legal assessment to engage with policymakers. And so we have already undertaken some legal research and gap analysis of legislation in both DRC and Congo. And we have written a gap report, the synthetic report, which outlines the need for legal reforms and also identify specific recommendations that we can help indigenous community to make strong proposal in the legal reform process. So based on the specific recommendation of the gap analysis, we assist community to develop their own proposal, and we help them use some existing platforms, or we create an opportunity for them to attend validation meetings, or have a specific meeting with policymakers at national levels so that they can share their proposal. Yeah, so national legal assessment and engagement with policymakers to assist community to feed and make the strong proposal is how we are trying to influence gap in existing legal framework in both countries. Next slide, please. And then, so the change we want to see is that policymakers are better equipped to understand and manage trade-off between conservation, human rights, and restorations, and also ensure sustainable community management of lands and resources, and also no community, no one is left behind. And just to recall that the principle of leaving no one behind implies that tackling discrimination and inequalities. And to do that, we need to address the root cause of discriminations and poverty. And there are some structural factors that imply the poverty of marginalized community, including land tenure and securities. So these barriers of land tenure, securities, and discrimination need to be addressed so that the community who have less power in the policy area can just benefit from substantive outcome and right recognized by policy makers. And so how will influencing natural resource management policy can make a difference? We think that indigenous people, when they have the right recognized, are better able to contribute to conservation. And if law enforcement is not an issue for them, and if the right is integrated in the conservation paradigm, then they are also able to contribute and through their own initiative to the restoration initiative and conservation of biodiversity. And once they have the right land recognized, they are also able to protect and prevent deforestation for external and third parties. And increase recognition of indigenous people conserved territories, or OECM or ICCS will also have significant impact for the conservation and nature restorations in both countries. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I have mentioned in my earlier slide the opportunities identified to make to recognize the right of indigenous people in the context of nature restoration. But we have been facing also some challenges, and we have also learned in the process. And some of the challenges, the main challenges or obstacles are the fact that we are in the context of state ownerships, where the land, soil, and subsoil are owned by the state. And FPIC is not working in practice and is applied as a tick box exercise. And regulatory rollback are common, like in DRC, while partners and CSO engaging in the elaboration of the government national biodiversity strategy action plans. In December last year, the unilaterally, without any consultation, adopted a decree to establish a green corridor going from Kivu to Kinshasa. And so this is some of the step back which can undermine the effort of CSO and partners, and also the issue of consultation in the adoption and validation of the renewable reform process, some of the main challenges that we have identified. And to end with the lesson learned, I think the presentation was just to highlight issue around trade-off between human rights and development, and policy trying to alleviate poverty. But in terms of nature restoration and conservation, we think that community does not need first to demonstrate that we are able to preserve biodiversity, but first the right and land tenure need to be recognized, and then there will be the capacity to better protect the forest and protect it from land grab or third-party exploitations. Yeah, so basically this is one of the things I want to share from both DRC and Republic of Congo, but broadly from Congo Basin. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Lassana, for a very good presentation. It also shows really that our work is more or less have some similarities in all areas. Whether it's Ethiopia, I see also similarities with the work we do here in Tanzania and also in Congo. But one thing I think that stands out clearly is that governance, policies, and power dynamics, both at global, national, and local levels, can either enable or obstruct locally led restoration efforts. I know that governance policies and power influence access to land and resources, define accountability, and really determine whether local communities are positioned as central actors. They should be at the center, or they are positioned as passive recipients in restoration initiatives. So we still have a lot of work to do. For example, in Tanzania, with our work in REDAA, we work with communities on 3 key areas, but I will also communicate here now the work with communities on strengthening land rights to match what Lassana has just presented. And this is for the outcome of getting the certificate of customary rights of occupancy. And this avoids or reduces the land conflicts to allow people to really be able to function on their work. And this is especially for women and youth to work without disruptions, to have the land planned properly for them to be able to work effectively. So we have a lot of areas that we all really can share. But I know that this is the session where I warmly invite all of you to please share your questions to our speakers, of course, to me as well. I will be here to lead the conversation. And maybe one thing that you can already know, Odi, I see participants are asking, how do you ensure the local communities have meaningful decision-making power in nature restoration efforts? And what challenges have you faced in doing so? Welcome.
Of decision-making actually is embedded in the level of participation that the community is having in any restoration issues. Participation normally may range from simple consultation to a decision to say no, or actually to accept or reject. In doing so, in many of the restoration efforts, there are problems, especially those restorations which are coming top down, or when they are laid by institutions which are not community institutions, and or when they are government laid. Whenever they are government laid, there are issues of politics that the system, the administrative system is working, and the power of the community is really greatly reduced. So what we are trying to do, as briefly mentioned in my presentation, is encouraging the local communities to be knowledgeable and understanding of their own problem as well as their own solutions. We are trying to provide training. We are trying to provide awareness creation opportunities so that decisions could be made by the communities. So I think this is briefly what I could say about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And indeed, I completely understand ensuring that communities are at the forefront is something that is crucial and important. To add to my colleague, Odi, is that, for example, for Tanzania, we are working to support and capacitate organized farmers and pastoralists and entrepreneurs in this program of REDAA, really capacitating and empowering and strengthening them on advocacy and lobbying through a tool that we have. It's a farmers advocacy consultation tool. And this is for policy influence and policy change. We are working hard on this. Has it been easy? No. There are still challenges, but I'm not sure how, Lassana, in Congo, you are also tackling this situation. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rita. Yes, we are tackling similar issues in Congo basins. So I think in the context of conservation specifically, what we are trying to do now is to help community to understand their rights and also help them to input in the legal reform process with a proposal in terms of how their they see their contribution should be. And to support this, we do some mapping, cross-country mapping, differential mapping, but also documenting sustainable tradition use and community governance. And so we try to engage in the various sectoral legislation and ongoing reforms. So you have the land tenure reform, the mining reform, and the forest reform, and the conservation, the law on protected areas. So we are in a context where there are various scenarios where communities are making claims to secure the customary land so that they can engage in their own initiatives. And in different contexts, you have community who are facing the threat of law enforcement in relation to wildlife protections. And I mentioned the issue of the human and wildlife conflict, where community are left with no adequate livelihoods, while they are also under the obligation to protect the species. But when the species destroy the crops, they are left with no alternative measure to secure their livelihood. And yes, that's how we trying to manage existing issues and also trying to assist community to input into that process. And I also saw one question about the Kivu-Kinshasa Green Corridor established recently in DRC. So the Green Corridor covers 550,000 square kilometers, including large areas of primary forest and impact peatlands. And this is a good initiative in terms of climate policy. And but the CSO have also made a statement early in January indicating that the realization of this vision should be accompanied by meaningful engagement with all stakeholders and a coherent and robust governance structures. And this is in a context where the DRC has started developing a strategy of conservation outside protected areas. At the moment, the main conservation framework is the protected areas, and communities, territories are put aside for the moment. So they wanted to integrate that into the negotiation when this Green Corridor issue was released by early last year. Yeah, so yeah, these are some of the immediate answers I can share now.
Okay, thank you very much, Lassana. Now I have an intriguing question to both of you. Let me ask you both, understanding our governments in Africa, and let's be particular to these three countries that we are focusing on today. What advice do you have for countries where government power dynamics and corruption challenges or blocking community projects and rights? This is a question from one of our participants. What advice do you have? What advice do you have for countries where government power dynamics and corruption challenges blocks community project rights? And I will start with Odi.
Actually, corruption and blockage of the system for locally led restoration effort is nearly everywhere. It is the question of the level that actually is influencing. In our case, there are, to some extent, this is happening. One is, both are systemic issues, right? That need to be solved in a system way. At a local level, we need to try and work with the people. At a higher level, we may try to lobby in certain ways to influence the overall system. So both ways action is required. One is to work with farmers, the communities, and make them aware about their rights, how beneficial this exercise is, be it the work being conducted individually or collectively in small group or bigger group, or in the smaller administrative status, and so on. On the other, we are going to provide a mechanism by which we can influence through lobbying, through the action of the community. What is going on is a wrong direction and things are not being implemented as they are. I think these sort of issues are part of what we have been talking, what we lack from the policies as well as from the activities that they exist there.
Thank you, Odi. Lassana, you want to add on that?
Yes, just briefly, I think building capacity at local levels and then trying to protect the community interest through building the capacity. I think that's will be a first step in terms of how we manage the issue of corruption at national levels. So yeah, I think we can start from my experience, need to start from building constituency at local and then being able to react to issues around threat and corruptions for the communities.
Thank you very much. So ensuring support to communities, whether it comes to policies, whether it comes to decision making, whether it comes to their voice, finance is an essential aspect. I would like to share an experience here in Tanzania, then my colleagues you would add. For example, here we support access to finance through community microfinance groups, as well as, of course, linking pastoralists and farmers and entrepreneurs to markets. For improved livelihoods, really, this is the objective. For now, for example, we are supporting 15 community microfinance groups, and each group has a minimum of 15 members, which means we are reaching about 315 people with this aspect of finance. So how can financing mechanism be restructured to ensure that locally led nature restoration initiatives have direct, timely, and flexible access to funds, especially in the context where governance systems are not as strong? What do you think should be done? And we are finalizing. I will just go straight to Odi.
The finance issue is always a critical problem everywhere, where sufficient finance, when it's not at hand, activities will be jeopardized. But resources that can be generated within the community could also be put into good use and could do a lot in actual land restoration activities. We have a very good example of an individual who, as a family, has worked in order to control a very big gully. we have released a small fact sheet in terms of that, and which actually do not require any finance. However, initiative, knowledge, and motivation that comes from the individuals as a family. So while in a bigger scale that a lot of finances might be required, down to individuals, there are also a very great potential to be used in order to work with the resources that we do have.
Thank you. Lassana, I'll only give you 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. That's enough. So to add, I think we also need to tackle policy and initiative at the global levels, because I just want to share one example of we have seen in the Congo Basin is the dedicated grant mechanisms of finance mechanism of the World Bank. And the fund was supposed to help and assist community initiatives, but a significant amount of resources and time was put in the preliminary studies and analysis and research. And after the initial phase, community has received no funding. So there's a need to adjust and provide for adequate funding that can reach communities, and organizations supporting communities also need to build their capacities so that they are able to manage the funds they receive from existing grants or mechanisms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, my colleagues. I know we would like to continue discussing very interesting topic, but time is running out and we have to proceed. We only have a few more minutes before the session ends. So I thank everyone who has put up the question. We wish we could answer all of them, but there are many questions. Thank you so much. So for now, I will hand over to Francesca and Janine for you to really proceed. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ritha. We just wanted to circle back to some of the comments that you put in the chat box and just bring them together, because we understand it's quite hard to follow everything in the chat and it becomes quite disjointed. And we gave you, the audience, an opportunity to answer the question, what are the external factors that challenge locally led nature restoration in your context? And these are some of the responses that we got. So just to take a minute to have a look at these. There's quite a few people on the call clearly from Tanzania or with experience in Tanzania. So there's some suggestions here in Tanzania that perhaps Tanzania has great policies and strategies, but there's an implementation gap and then a monitoring gap to ensure the proper implementation of policies. Another colleague added to this though and said that there's a lack of supporting policies that address land restoration and enhance sustainable farming. And then another colleague mentioned there's a lack of institutional coordination and that's an issue. Janine, did you want to point to West Africa and some comments from there?
Yeah, thank you. I think we saw a lot of similar comments as well from participants who have shared thoughts in relation to West Africa. So we also saw that people were commenting that there is policy misalignment and also a lack of policy or legislation that gives farmers or communities appropriate or clear rights to land or to trees. And we also saw an example from Nigeria where the regulatory framework that exists around land rights actually deters the implementation of sustainable land management practices. And there's a very low percentage of land that is registered, or there are no sort of strong structures to protect informal land rights.
And then just two other comments from other contexts. So our colleagues in Uganda mentioned that corruption by highly placed officials is a tricky external factor, and indeed We did discuss this a little bit in response to one of the questions asked from our colleague from the WCMC. And then in Zimbabwe, again, reflecting this issue of a lack of integrated planning across sectors, across institutions, highlighting again a similar comment to what was in Tanzania. So hopefully, I think together we have all demonstrated what Ritha opened us up to say. Restoration is not just an ecological issue, it's a governance issue, and we must treat it that way. Ritha, over to you for some concluding comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. What gives me hope is that we are ending with the intention that we really started with. I am really pleased to learn that we are looking at this in the same direction. All of you, good people, all of us recognize and believe in strengthening the role of communities. It is imperative. And it is encouraging for me, really, to listen and hear that we are all ready to continue addressing the structural barriers through policy reforms. Really reform legal, financial, and institutional obstacles. And what is most interesting here is that we are encouraged to continue promoting inclusive and acceptable governance. Restoration should not be technographic, and this is really something we should talk about. It must be equitable and inclusive. Governance systems should reflect diverse voices, especially those of women, youth, and indigenous communities, whose connection to nature is often deep and long-standing. It's about balancing expert know-how, input with inclusive participatory decision-making. I would like to end by a call to action. I would like to call the people in power, policymakers, to be bold in shifting power, creating and uphold spaces for local actors to lead, commit to listening and co-designing with communities rather than speaking for them. And to communities, I know all of us are passionate about communities, but not only passionate, believe in our communities. I would like to call on to communities. Your leadership is critical. Continue to assert your rights, share your knowledge, and demand meaningful inclusion in policy spaces. Restoration begins with me. Restoration begins with you. And your vision must shape the future. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Incredibly powerful. Thank you so much, Ritha, and thanks to Lassana and Awdenegest, our conversationalist today. We hope you've enjoyed it. Before you log off, please, 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 can we ask you to respond to one question? We're going to launch a poll now. And that question to you is, to what extent did the session today provide valuable ideas, approaches, or learning on locally led nature restoration? If you wouldn't mind just responding to that before you log off, that would be very helpful, just so that we can understand and learn from this event and how we shape our future events. Thanks again for joining us today and spending an hour and 15 minutes of your time with us. We really do appreciate it. And very much again, thanks to Ritha and our speakers. If you would like to contact us, our information is on the screen now. And that's everything. Please do respond to the poll, and then thanks very much. Take care.